Former President Donald Trump is back in court today as the consummate Trump insider Hope Hicks takes the stand. We break down what she said, plus a mixed bag from new economic numbers leave President Biden in a pickle. We go live with the top White House economic advisor on the state of play. And the president has ramped up his response to the protests rocking colleges across the nation. Now, the administration is echoing his tough talk with a warning about the anti-Semitic incidents on campus. I'm Chris Steyerwalt, filling in for Blake Berman. The Hill on NewsNation starts right now. You people are in luck this Friday because with us today we have the spectacular collection of humans. Mike Vaquera, he is the NewsNation Washington bureau chief. Roma Daravi, she is a former White House deputy director of communications under Donald Trump. Brad Howard, he's a former leadership aide for House Democrats, a Democratic strategist, big deal. And Julia Manchester, our friend, she is a national political reporter for The Hill. So we begin this evening with a major moment in Donald Trump's hush money trial. Hope Hicks, his former top communications advisor, took the stand today. A major focus of her testimony was on the payments to pornographic actress Stormy Daniels, allegedly to keep her silent about a tryst with Trump, which he denies. Hicks broke down on the stand as her cross-examination was about to begin. After regaining her composure, she testified Trump told her, quote, it would have been bad to have that story come out before the election. Now, her testimony is key as prosecutors try to show Trump attempted to hide the payments to Daniels to influence the election. Julia, I want to start with you on this. Okay, why do we care so much why Donald Trump wanted Stormy Daniels, if indeed he did? Yeah. Why do we care so much why he wanted her not to talk about it?
Well, we care so much about it because of, those hush money payments and whether there were, was any illegal wrongdoing with that. That's a big deal. And I think the prosecution is obviously talking about this idea of election interference. That's their big take on this. But in terms of Hope Hicks, Hope Hicks was someone who really had the ear of Donald Trump for quite some time, his right-hand woman in many ways. She was very much close to him, so she would know a lot.
Going back from before he was running for president, she was out in before the ground floor.
Exactly, so that's why her testimony was really so important today, ultimately.
Okay, Mike, the reality is that reality show is that
my first.
This is a different look, a different vibe of Donald Trump that we're seeing. We're seeing him in these courthouse hallways. We're seeing the optics here for a president who cared very much about the optics of things, about the look of things. The look here is harder to stage manage, harder to control, and the narrative is not flattering. How do you see it?
Well, there are two things. First of all, on the question of why her testimony was significant, that quote that you read, he was glad that it didn't come out in the election. That really gets to the nut of the matter because the prosecution is trying to prove that these payments were involved in affecting the election. That is the key to bringing this case as a fraud, as a felony, as a criminal case. That is what was so potentially damaging about what Hope Hicks said. But she also said that he was concerned about Melania Trump, which would move it away from concern about the election. So there's some wiggle room, a win for both sides of the prosecution and defense, as far as I can see of what happened today. As far as the political implications, we went through this, and this came up in the trial today, the Access Hollywood tape in October before the 2016 election. Many of us, many people wrote Donald Trump off after that. These salacious details coming out again just before the election. What are we, 6 months out before the election? But it's been proven that they don't do that much damage to him politically.
Roma, how is this perceived inside Trump world? Is this a betrayal by Hope Hicks, or is this okay, or how does this play?
It's certainly not a betrayal. Look, Hope is doing exactly what she should be. She took the stand and she told the truth. And the media has this narrative that there was chaos that ensued at Trump Tower that day. I worked on the 2016 campaign in Trump Tower. Chaos did not ensue. Certainly there was shock, but everybody got right back to work, and the train kept going. If anything, we worked harder because, as well as what you just said, Mike, the idea that Trump is saying he didn't want this to happen during the election cycle. Of course he didn't. No political campaign would want any scandal of any kind leading up to an election, especially 4 days prior. His main concern here is his wife and his family, and he said that repeatedly. So, I think the media is definitely going to twist that narrative. You'll see it in the courtroom as well from, the opposing counsel. But at the end of the day, this payment was made by Michael Cohen. He is a proven liar on the stand, and we shouldn't be trusting him in the courtroom as the #1 witness on this thing.
Brad, this is a narrative Democrats like, right? The discussion of why did Donald Trump pay money to a pornographic actress? Was it this reason or that reason? That's got to be, either way, there's something good in it for Democrats, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think we would rather, honestly, Democrats at the end of the day care about policy. We'd rather be having arguments about policy. But what I will say, Hope Hicks is both genuine and credible, and I think to the jury. And number two, the 2 points she drove home for the prosecution was that he did not want the story to come out, which I agree with Roma. Nobody wants that kind of story. But it could be also for an all of the above reason, both his wife and the campaign. And number two, that he had a very involved approval process on things like this. And the campaign was super sensitive to it because days earlier he'd went on air and said, "I'm sorry for what I said on the Access Hollywood tape." I don't know if many people remember that moment, but it was pretty huge for Donald Trump to say, "I'm sorry." So it was very top of mind for the campaign and the candidate at the time, and this is the last thing they wanted to come.
All right, you want to talk about policy? We're going to get out of the gutter. New numbers out today on the strength of the economy. Employers adding 175,000 jobs last month. Now that was short of economists' expectations, but still steady growth in the labor market. President Biden touting the numbers, saying well over 15 million jobs created since I took office, wages rising faster than prices, and unemployment below 4% for a record 27 months in a row. Former President Trump today, not surprisingly, offering a very different take.
The job numbers came out, they're really, really low, really bad. Our economy's bad, and now it's starting to show. So you'll see, and it'll only get worse. It'll only get worse.
Joining us now, senior White House advisor Gene Sperling. Mr. Sperling, thanks for making time for us. And first, I just want to get your top line. What's your read on the numbers? Is this good enough, or is this cause for concern?
We've been saying for a while that after the just rocket job growth that we had in 2021, and that we needed to transition to what would be strong but sustainable job growth. What you have now is still an average of 245,000 jobs created per month in this year so far. So even now in 2024, this is a stronger jobs market than many, many people predicted. I will say under the previous administration, they never had a single year that averaged over 200,000 jobs per month. We're still averaging 245,000 even in this month. And then the fact that unemployment was still under 4% for the 27th month in a row. That hasn't happened in 50, 60 years. So, it's not good enough because, people are still facing too high costs in their family and personal lives. But in terms of the job market, yes, this is steady, sustainable job growth, better than even a soft landing. It's a very steady and strong landing.
So there's a little upside downness to the world of the economy and finance, which is that if the news is bad, then it increases the chance of a Federal Reserve rate cut, which would juice the economy, right? So this is for normal people, we look at this and say, wait, if it's bad, it's good. When we think about what the Federal Reserve might do, I know it's not your job to tell the Federal Reserve what to do. Do you think that we're headed for a rate cut and to goose the economy in the next few months, maybe the next 6 months, let's say?
Well, going to your first point, I do think it's very important when you're in the White House in a policy job to be focused on what's good for the economy as opposed to what the reaction is. And you're right, you can have moments where the market may respond less to what's happening in the real economy and more on what they think the Federal Reserve is going to do. But I think that what people have always hoped for is that the transition from this there's been 15.4 million jobs created, almost 15 in 3 years. That's unheard of before President Biden came in, but no one ever suggested that was sustainable. And the question is, was it going to be a hard downturn, or were you going to be able to transition to something steady, sustainable? The kind of job growth we're seeing right now is historically strong. The fact that you could come down from these, huge job growth numbers that took place when President Biden came in after the American Rescue Plan, after dealing with the pandemic, and that you can have this kind of transition. I think, truthfully, Democrat, Republican, everybody would say honestly that this is exactly the type of transition to strength and sustainability that you would like to see without a downturn that might bring inflation down, but would hurt millions and millions of Americans.
From your world of upside-down inputs to my world in politics about upside-down numbers of influence, we have all of the data that tell us voter attitudes about the election or about the economy harden at the end of the second quarter of the year. So basically, by July 1, data show George H.W. Bush could have told us a sad story about what happens when voters don't feel improvement in time. That seems to be the predicament for your boss, seems to be the predicament for the incumbent this time. He's got 2 months, it seems like. Will voters feel better about this economy by the time we get into the heat of the summer?
Well, first of all, the most important thing for any president is their actual record. And what the president has is an incredible record of legislative achievement. I really don't think that's very controversial. Extraordinary record on jobs and unemployment and restoring manufacturing. I think what you're dealing with, though, is that post-pandemic, not just in the United States, but virtually every country in the world, prices still are higher in some areas than they were, even though inflation, as we know, the PCE is at 2.7 or the core PCE is at 2.8. People are still feeling some of the effects and the insecurities. But what we're doing is just keeping our eye on the ball. And one of the big differences people are going to see and focus on even more is who's actually fighting for lower prices. The president had a $150 billion plan to build housing supply that could have lowered costs. Every Republican voted against it. The president successfully made a proposal to lower insulin costs and cap out-of-pocket drug costs for Medicare recipients. Again, he got that done. Every Republican voted against it. So what we're going to focus on more is beyond this good job market. We sympathize with the fact that costs are too high, but we're going to make more clear repeatedly who's taking on powerful interests to lower costs and prices for families and who is opposing that. And that, I think, is going to be what the focus is going to be in the months to come.
Mr. Sperling, we are out of time, so much so that I didn't even get to ask you about the report I read about you and your famous dancing after hours here in Washington, D.C., which has generated quite a lot of buzz. But the next time
you have enough salacious discussion there without going to very exaggerated views. I'll just say one thing on my dancing. I have benefited from very, very, very low expectations. And I'll just leave it with that.
Fantastic. Gene Sperling, thank you very much. Okay, Julia, so some fancy footwork, perhaps, if you'll pardon me, on how to contextualize and talk about the state of the economy. And you hear it in Gene Sperling's voice. He knows the problem of translating numbers into reality for people. How is that going?
Yeah, it's not going well. I mean, Americans say they're still not feeling prices go down. And even this talk about job growth. I mean, we're still seeing job growth, and that's something that President Biden brings up all the time on the trail and from the podium at the White House. But that even sort of slowed down. So it's not good right now for the White House. That being said, we still have some time for the election, but the pressure is certainly on. The pressure is on really for the White House to make this case, because Democrats can talk about abortion and other issues all they want, but I think ultimately the economy does really impact people. That's the number one issue, and they need to find a way to, message on that or, improve things for now.
Great piece in The Atlantic not too long ago that talked about basically that Democratic elites have been self-talking about the vibes, recession, and how everything is really better than this. And if you look at a lot of prominent voices on the left, you hear a lot of soothing self-talk. The economy is actually a lot better than it is. Has there been a problem about addressing the realities of the economic situation in the country, particularly around inflation, for Democrats, that they haven't gotten serious about this and sort of raised the alarm sooner?
Yes. I mean, but when you're messaging the economy, you kind of have to take a rosy picture or a terrible picture. The gray area, middle ground, it's just hard to message when you're running for public office here. But you're starting to see the White House get it in certain ways. Yeah, this week the president was in North Carolina talking about lead pipes, not from a sense of, yes, there was an
pro or con.
$3 billion again.
Okay.
$3 billion lead pipe investment, but those are good domestic union jobs with good wages, and that's really where we're seeing the highlight of the growth here is the jobs that are growing are good jobs. And so the White House needs to tout that. Initially, you're going to start to see a shift to taxes because there's going to be a debate over taxes, what we should do when the Trump tax cuts are up for renewal. Democrats think that the elite or the wealthy are just getting wealthier, and we need to pay their fair share and enforce the tax code on them so that we can start reinvesting back in the economy.
I'm going to reserve time for you to say how wrong you think that he was about all of the things that he said. But we stipulate for the record, but we have to move on to this story right now. Also today, longtime Texas Democratic Congressman Henry Cuellar indicted by federal prosecutors. Cuellar and his wife are charged with accepting $600,000 in bribes from two foreign entities, allegedly laundering those bribes through companies owned by Cuellar's wife. And in return, prosecutors say Cuellar agreed to influence foreign policy. Cuellar says he's innocent and running for re-election. Quote, "Before I took any action, I proactively sought legal advice from the House Ethics Committee. The actions I took in Congress were consistent with the actions of many of my colleagues." That's when you say, Mike, that everybody does it. That is. Am I reading that statement correctly? That he says everybody does it?
I would like to know what that conversation with the Ethics Committee was like. Whether he divulged that he took $600,000 from Azerbaijan interests in their eternal, perpetual war and enmity with neighboring Armenia, and he advocated for Azerbaijan is the way the story goes. Look, Henry Cuellar is he's always been a rogue within the Democratic Party to begin with. He got his office by primarying another Democrat and winning that seat. He's been there for quite some time. Fascinating to me that he didn't even face a primary this time. And he's in a district that's a Biden +7 district there in Southwest Texas. Actually became more Democratic recently. So we're going to have an indicted, it appears, a Democratic congressman on the ballot, but perhaps in the larger scheme of things, evidence for Democrats to say weaponization of the Justice Department.
Oh, there you go. Look at Vic. It's turnabout. Sauce for the goose, sauce for the gander.
Yeah.
I want to say, I think this is a potentially competitive seat, right? And when Republicans look at this and their growth with Hispanic voters, they have to look at this border district and say, we got a chance, right?
Absolutely. Look, Cassie Garcia, who ran against him, had a very competitive race. She comes from the Ted Cruz group, and she had a lot of support in the district. I wouldn't be surprised if we see another go-around there because the constituents are certainly not going to be happy with this. And he has a very specific line to kind of toe here. Being a border area, it's a huge focus. And if his interests are not aligned overseas, how can they be aligned domestically? And really, the voter is less concerned with what's happening overseas. Generally, foreign policy doesn't bleed into the election too much.
Azerbaijan not playing big in the Rio Grande Valley is what you're saying.
It will for some places. Perhaps in Los Angeles, there's there's an Armenian population.
We're going to go to the end of the table here for our two Hill experts for the deep knowledge. Okay, Brad, you served in the House Blue Dog. You worked for the House Blue Dog Caucus. You know these people. What's up?
So I spoke to some folks in the Henry Cuellar world, and first of all, they are shocked. They thought this issue was behind them. They thought the FBI, he was never the target of the investigation, so this really kind of caught them off guard. But what I will say is, he knows his district well. He has survived serious primary challengers and had been renominated and reelected every time. And I think he will in this seat because they know him. I think they're going to reelect him again. I feel confident he's going to win. But what I will say is the reason why he's highlighting the House ethics, and this is a little secret behind the scenes in the Hill.
That's what you're here for.
When you get advice, written advice from the House Ethics Committee, you are protected from any kind of House Ethics Committee prosecution because you followed their advice.
Right.
So if you can show the letter saying I did what you told me to do, then you kind of protected within the House ethics system. Doesn't protect you.
Doesn't help you with the feds.
Correct. And so there's that. That's why he's bringing that up. But I'll say, number two is that his statement is that he was offered to sit down with the prosecutors and they declined. That he got advice from counsel and he got advice from House ethics, and that he is doing. And the time will tell whether or not he did all of that. But, I got to think that the voters of his district know him well, and I think he's going to win this. As long as there's not a conviction, then that turns things all around.
I don't think they knew he took $600,000.
Right. Julia, real quick, before we go, Democrats had a lot of fun watching Republicans gag on George Santos and his and all of that stuff. How are House Democrats going to play this?
Look, I think Democrats in general, this is tough for them because you not only have Henry Cuellar and his issue in the House, but you have Bob Menendez in the Senate. So, look, I think Henry Cuellar has always been, in a way, a thorn in Democrats' side, particularly on the issue of abortion. So I think there might be some distancing.
I don't know. We have to go. Save that excellence, because still to come on the Hill on NewsNation, House Republicans are in a swing state, Pennsylvania, today, putting the spotlight on violent crime in Philadelphia. Passions ran high. And Donald Trump is heading to Florida this weekend for a Republican donor retreat. And a number of the guests happen to be vying to be his vice presidential candidate. I will break it down for you on the other side of these messages. Stay with us. Welcome back. Donald Trump is on his way home to Florida after another week in a New York courtroom. And tonight, the former president, will kick off a 3-day Republican donor retreat in Palm Beach. On top of raising money for his campaign, this weekend will also be a casting call of sorts as Trump auditions potential running mates. So let's break it down. Why don't we do that? Okay, so who's going to Mar-a-Lago? A massive list of donors, of course, but Marco Rubio, Florida senator, will be there. Could he be the vice presidential pick for the Republicans? Who else will be there? Tim Scott will be there. Yep. How about J.D. Vance? So here's 3 senators. Could any of them be there? Not Rubio. Couldn't be him because he's from the same state as Trump, and that doesn't work for the Electoral College. I don't see why J.D. Vance would be the guy. If there's a voter that J.D. Vance can get that Trump doesn't already have, I don't know who it would be. Tim Scott makes a lot of sense. You can see that. What about this cat? What about Doug Burgum? White dude, notably white dude, and from a state that Trump is going to win by 8 bajillion points, North Dakota. He's good on energy stuff for Trump, but it's not going to work. Kristi Noem, we don't want to the dog thing. Yeah, woof, as Brad Howard comes in with the woof, and then Elise Stefanik. So out of these folks, who could it be? Who could come out of here? I don't know whether Noem's situation with bragging about shooting a puppy is going to permanently disable her chances, but right now you'd have to say that she's in pretty big trouble. Elise Stefanik, I still am skeptical of because I think she's too ambitious and I think that she would make Trump nervous. Tim Scott definitely still in the running. But what about this other person? What about this human being? Marsha Blackburn. Now, if we think about this as Trump does, central casting, you want a person who looks the part. Now, we've heard Mick Mulvaney, if you're out there watching, yes, I know, I can hear you shouting at your television. It's going to be Ben Carson. I hear you. But what we know is that Trump wants somebody who looks the part. And of everybody out there, especially if you're looking for a woman, and Marsha Blackburn as an older person would not be a massive threat to Trump. She would not be champing at the bit, like somebody like Stefanik. So I increasingly think that Marsha Blackburn is one to really watch for the Trump Veep stakes, if only because she looks the part. Mike Vaquera, tell me I'm right. Say
really
how right I am. Say how right I am.
Are we really going to do this? We're really going to play this guessing game now about who?
Well, here's the thing. The first debate, and I want to hear from Roma on this, but the first debate is, when do you do it? Donald Trump Jr. and other people around Trump say do it now because you're in court, so start it and don't build up suspense until the convention. Okay,
well, that's one thing I would say after we've all watched the former president since he started running for president, and even before, I think that he will want to play it out as long as possible.
I would think so.
Yeah, Milwaukee, July 15th, I think, is the first day of the convention. I should know. I'm doing a lot of planning for it.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm counting on you to give me credentials. So if that's not happening, let me know.
No problem. Well, you called on me first, so now you're golden. But I'm going to go Elise Stefanik. I'm going to go against you here because I think she has demonstrated her fealty to Donald Trump, her loyalty to Donald Trump, has carried Donald Trump's water in the House of Representatives, has said and done all of the things, conformed her ideology and policies to Donald Trump, and is somebody who's very forthright behind Donald Trump. Marsha Blackburn is too, of course. And my swamp brain says, yes, a woman is.
Yeah. Okay, Roma, when Trump puts on a floor show, which this sort of is, right? It's a cattle call. You bring all these people in, you bring these potential Veeps in, but you bring them in for the donors. So he's bringing in the donors throughout the weekend at Mar-a-Lago to raise all this money. So they get to sort of feel like they're part of the process, right? He's bringing them into the process of vetting these people and choosing a running mate.
Well, I would rewind, actually, and go back to the first time we were in Milwaukee for the first presidential debate and say many of these people, both on the screen and others, as well as the donors, were there. So they have been watching these people for quite some time. They've seen how their policies align with Trump, how maybe they don't, like with some of Nikki Haley's, how maybe they look presidential, how maybe they don't. All of those things have been front and center for quite some time. And President Trump is going to have a lot of people coming to him for a number of reasons. VP is the top slot, but any number of these people could be in the cabinet too.
Do you pick now or do you pick later? Would you, if you were advising the president?
If I were a betting woman, which I'm not because it's against my religion and my faith, I would say you'll see something at the convention and not sooner.
Wait, okay, who tell me I'm right about Marsha Blackburn.
You're right.
Or I'm cutting your mic.
In my head, in my head that makes the most sense for all the reasons you said, and I'll add too that he needs a woman right now, but it's not because of it's because abortion has become front and center. And if he can get just like Kamala Harris is a good messenger on this issue for Biden, she is with the base. I mean, she's rallying around the issue. Yeah. I think Marsha Blackburn can do the same and help guide them through these issues.
And that hair.
But when I go back to Rubio real quick, what I'm hearing is that Rubio won't be picked, not because he can move out of state, right? But he has to resign his Senate seat. If he does that, DeSantis gets to pick a Senate seat.
Ronnie D. Okay, there's still much more ahead on the Hill. Anti-Israel protesters continue to besiege college campuses across the nation. The Biden administration is now taking a stronger stance. How's it playing with voters? That's next. Welcome back to the Hill. As colleges and universities gear up for graduation, the Biden administration is taking a stronger stance toward pro-Palestinian protests. In a letter today, Education Secretary Miguel Cardona told university heads, quote, "These and other such incidents are abhorrent, period. They have no place on our college campuses. Anti-Semitism is discrimination and is prohibited." Okay, panel, we saw President Biden condemn the violence and anti-Semitism yesterday. But Julia, I want to start with you. This is a very difficult straddle for this administration and this candidate, because on the one hand, there are all the voters out here in the mainstream who are grossed out and fed up by what they see, and it looks like chaos and it looks like disorder. On the other hand, a core constituency in the Democratic Party is very sympathetic to the ambitions of the protesters. How do you see this playing?
Yeah, look, it's difficult for Democrats, and you don't have to look any further to see the, members of Congress on the Democratic side of the aisle that have visited Columbia and some of these schools. On one hand, a few weeks ago, you had a group of Democrats, many from the New York delegation, come and visit, and, so many of them signed on to a letter demanding that Columbia tear down the encampment or the board resigns or board members resign. On the other side of this, you have members of Congress like Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, who also visited the protests, but visited her daughter and, other protesters who were taking part in this. So it's very, very difficult because, the progressives are obviously a very important part of the party, but you have the Michigan issue playing out, large Arab American population in Michigan. Minnesota isn't necessarily a swing state, but it's sort of emblematic of how difficult it is for Democrats to message on this. And, you have internal arguments. You see it on X. Last week, it was Jared Moskowitz versus Bernie Sanders.
Yep.
This is playing out.
Mike, one of the reasons that Donald Trump lost his reelection bid in 2020 was the unrest in American cities and what was going on. It's bad for unrest is bad for incumbents, especially when it seems like they're not able to deal with it.
Again, whether it's 1968 or it's 2020 or it's 2024, it's not a good look, and it makes people very uneasy. And look, there was a leader of Congress, the House of Representatives, Jim Clyburn, who was at the White House today getting the Medal of Freedom.
He did.
Yes. He and Bernie Sanders have both in recent days made the comparison to Biden's Vietnam.
Wow.
And I don't think they use that exact phrase, but they sort of evoked that. And what we saw in 1968, speaking of conventions.
Yeah. I was about to say. Yeah. While you're getting credentials from me for Chicago, you're also getting me some credentials.
Some riot gear.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
How is that going to go?
The convention?
Yeah.
Two things that are hanging over the president right now. I think we've talked about one of them, war in Gaza.
Yep.
He really does need, because of everything that we've seen and all the scenes that we're seeing right now, come to some sort of conclusion. The White House again today saying that Netanyahu and Israeli forces should not, we're opposed to them invading Rafah in southern Gaza. So, it's a fraught moment. We don't know what's going to happen.
Okay, let's head now to Philadelphia, where House Republicans are turning up the pressure on Democrats over crime in that city. Philadelphia District Attorney Larry Krasner is facing backlash following the deaths of 2 Philadelphia police officers. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan is calling Krasner out for being soft on crime.
When you don't prosecute bad guys, you shouldn't be surprised that you get more crime. When you defund the police, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime. And when you have a designated area for illegal drug use, you shouldn't be surprised when you get more crime.
This is, Roma, a force multiplier for Republicans, right? When you have the control of the House, even if it's by 1 seat, you can use it as a messaging vehicle to go out and say to Pennsylvania voters, look at what's going on here, and to brand Democrats as a party that's soft on crime, right?
Absolutely. I mean, we've been doing that for quite a while. I would say we've been doing it for 6 years. The Democrats have been soft on crime, and defund the police movement didn't help with that. Now we've seen that the Democrats have, backtracked on that messaging there. So you're going to see a lot more of this in the next few months leading up to the election. The soft on crime narrative is going to sit very well with suburban women, which is a key voting district that we're looking at this cycle. Suburban women are up in terms of their voting for President Trump, higher than it's ever been before. It's not quite at where it is with Biden, of course, but it is leaning up. And you have to think that a lot of that has to do with the crime in their areas and with the economy. Those are going to be 2 things that are very key to winning this election cycle. And I will say, just on that last topic that we had, it's also going to bleed into the mix, because you have these students that are protesting, and it is becoming quite violent. And it is not just at Columbia. It's not just in New York. We're seeing it all across the country now.
Brad, we have a sort of an analog here to the question on the economy. The real numbers on crime are getting better, right? We've seen consistent improvement on violent crime, even a dip in some property crime. But if you ask voters what's going on, they say it's getting worse.
And here's another proof point: the murder rate nationally down 100%. Murder rate alone, the number of murders in Philly alone in 2022, 165 at this point. 2023, 154. Now 87. That's about half. So crime is down. And polling shows, though, that people think their local crime is down, but they think national crime is up. And to your point, that's because of messaging. That's a comms issue. When the actual data does not reflect attitudes, you've got to message to voters and make them feel safe. And right now they don't. And that's a big problem for them.
And there's also the long tail, right? It takes a long time for the folks who are shopping at the King of Prussia Mall to process through what was going on, so.
And it's a similar thing to the economy, right? Numbers are getting better. The voters, they're starting to feel a little bit, consumer confidence is ticking up, but not in a dramatic way that's going to reshape the election. it's going to be an interesting 6 months between now and then.
I think that is true. It is going to be an interesting 6 months between now and then. Coming up today on World Press Freedom Day, 3 news organizations are joining together to raise awareness for something important. We'll talk about it after the break.
NewsNation Fridays are for the experts.
You know this case so well. These two have been fighting about this the entire break. This is not fake.
The best legal mind on TV and his all-star panel. Dan Abrams Live, tonight on NewsNation.
Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, they're calling for awareness of journalists across the globe being persecuted and wrongfully detained in foreign countries. Now, it also renews pressure on the Biden administration to bring Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich home as Putin's regime continues to hold him now for more than a year. First, panel, let me just say this, and Mike, I want to start with you. I think we do not understand as American journalists how lucky we are, how fortunate we are that not only do we have freedom of the press, but we're also free generally, mostly from violence, from retribution, that we are not just free, but we're safe.
Right. I think a lot of American journalists would argue that the climate has become somewhat more hostile towards journalists, even in this country. But it is a reminder, the Evan Gershkovich's situation is a reminder, and the campaign, frankly, by his newspaper, the Wall Street Journal, a reminder of the importance of what we do, the vital nature of preserving it in this country, and, you know, what was the Thomas Jefferson quote about the press, giving me a choice between a free press and you know, it's just,
he was for it.
Yeah,
he was for it. He was definitely for it.
I mean, you're right.
Jay Manch. Question.
Jay Manch.
Which is the pressure. Well, first of all, how remarkable is it that you could get these 3 just dire competitors, these 3 publications fight constantly? The fact that they came together to do this is pretty impressive. But the Biden administration under pressure about Gershkovich, and that we brought Brittany Griner home.
Yeah, we're still waiting on Paul Whelan.
Still waiting on. So this is not a good look, right?
It's very difficult, and I think this could be applied to any administration when it comes to these, journalists or any American that's being held abroad. And it's so interesting, touching to see, the Gershkovich family and other families of Americans, not just journalists, but Americans who are held abroad, really come together as a community and really push for this. But no, it's not a good look, considering, obviously this is taking place the backdrop of the Russia-Ukraine war. So Biden administration under a ton of pressure on this.
Okay, Roma and Brad, say something nice about press freedom, please. Say something nice about us.
I'll say is all the greatest injustices of our time have been uncovered by journalists. I mean, you think back to the Catholic Church sex scandal on down the line, and it's because of Watergate, all that kind of stuff, all these fundamental things in society. And you see a lot of movies and TV shows about that because it's fascinating how they go about doing this and how committed journalists are, risking sometimes their own life, particularly when you look at the Middle East region at the moment. How many journalists have we lost in this conflict? And it's just sad, and I take pride in that's what sets America apart from the rest of the world.
A free press is not popular, but it is important. It is not popular. We get it. We know, but it is important, I promise. So, coming up, off to the races we go. Dun, 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 dun. Tomorrow is the Kentucky Derby. Why bettors will have to win big at the track to afford anything. Stay with us. You're watching The Hill on NewsNation. Tomorrow, the world will be watching what's known as the most exciting 2 minutes in sports, the Kentucky Derby, as the Triple Crown gets underway. But it appears that Churchill Downs is not immune to inflation. Derby-goers pointing out that drink prices jumped this year, with the signature mint julep costing a whopping $22. Take a look at the menu here, what's available. Now, I will point out that they were $18 last year. So it's not like the drinks at the Kentucky Derby were a bargain last year. Julia, question for you.
Yeah.
Are these prices preposterous? Are they worth it? What's your read?
I mean, look, they're on the higher end of the spectrum, but I have to say, as a Washington, D.C. resident, I see that, and I'm like,
hockey game, you pay that much for a beer.
Any bar in the city.
For those who are truly cash-strapped, you can do what we did in college, which is where you put it in a boot, you hide it in your bag, you put it
Or
I forget that you're a hillbilly sometimes.
I'm a proud redneck.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to bring you into my hillbilly tribe. I'm going to give you hillbilly status. Would you pay $22? Would you? Is that fair?
Well, it seems like a normal number for me. I lived in D.C., New York City, and Orange County, California. So a $22 drink is just another day at the restaurant. But this seems like a special occasion. I think people are getting all dressed up. There's a lot of glitz and glamour to it. I know it's a 2-minute race, but I think people are happy to pay the price for something like this.
I give you credit for not saying that it was Joe Biden's fault. That is good. I like that
We're
you
in the
bring.
E-block. This must be fun.
All right, Mike.
Friday night, Chris.
Mike, who are you betting? Who are you betting? Who do you like in the Derby? Who do you like in the Derby?
Man, I have no
you can
idea.
Give us a hot tip.
I don't even. I couldn't. Our boss Sherry Gretsch, she's there in her hat. Maybe
she's going to win. Yeah. Whatever.
Whoever she likes, that's who I'm.
That's who you're with. And here are the odds. You can see going off there at 20-1, Dormick, and 55-1, Epic Ride. I'd say track Phantom if you're looking for a long shot